This is Faith Still Seeking, a program about Christian theology. I believe, but I want to know more. I'm not a minister. I'm not a PhD. I'm just a layman, and I'm doing theology. Yeah, I definitely don't have it all figured out, but it's never stopped me from trying.
What the fuck am I doing here? Guess I'm looking for a place to be. I don't know what the hell to believe. I wish I had the answers up my sleeve.
Today we're talking with musician Steev RX, who is the writer and singer and performer of the theme song for this show, Purpose. Steev RX came out of the Arizona Southwest emo scene in the late 2000s. At the time, most of his work was behind the scenes, hosting local shows and building relationships with bands and musicians both locally and across the country before he was even 18. After running a venue for several years, he moved on from the local scene but continued writing and recording music. Today, Steev RX brings his own music front and center, blending his original Southwest emo roots with current trap and alt-pop music to create his own unique sound. So everybody, please welcome, as we've been talking about, Steev RX. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really, I enjoy your music. I've been listening to the My Eclectic Self album, and some of the songs on there are really like very, very kind of deep. I was listening to there's one, is it called Thoughts?
Yes. That's
that and Fold and some of the others, but it's a whole mix of different styles. So how do you describe the work and the music that you do?
I don't know. I just enjoy doing it. And so, it's funny, the name of my first album actually used to be my artist name until I changed it. Just because Steev RX felt more modern. That said, I've always felt like My Eclectic Self really summed it up because I have like a choral background. I kind of do like mostly like pop, hip hop ish type music, but I definitely jump around. I mean, Thoughts is like sort of like a folk song, and then I've got some more hip hop like things that are a little more like that, and I think they fit together. But I definitely do tend to be eclectic in that sense. I just enjoy a lot of different types of music.
Yeah. Well, it really shows all these different elements. Like it's hard to pin down to say like Steev does particular style. Do you think any of that influence is from the region that you're in? Is the Arizona scene different than other regions?
I don't think so anymore. There was a little bit of that, I guess, when I first started making music when I was in high school, and there was a little less regionality to it because I think at the time everybody was very much like more on MySpace. And I think that they're like more and more, right? Like as we're like more connected, it's actually, it's not like it was, in the 80s and 90s where you'll have, scenes of people who are, from regions.
Right.
Which is kind of good and bad, it's just different. So yeah, I wouldn't say my sound is really reminiscent of being in Arizona, but there are definitely things that I connected with about this scene particularly. I used to run a venue, and so in the community sense, I guess I do feel that a little bit. But as far as the sound goes, I really just I think a lot of it is just my background. Starting out singing in church and then singing in choir when I was in school.
That's a lot of my music background started there as well. I can remember being in a musical in high school, and somebody was like, "You've been in a church choir, haven't you? Because you're making like those big emotive faces of like, holy." So yes, they totally called me out on that. Is church and spirituality still part of your life at this point?
I have been a worship leader actually for really since I graduated high school. I'm actually not at a church right now. The church that I was at for the last few years since COVID started, they were a church plant, and then I think they really struggled after COVID to get going again. But the pastor ended up getting a great offer, and they ended up closing the church. So right now I'm not really leading anywhere, but I'm definitely still a worship leader. It's still a big part of kind of what I do, even though, my own music is not Christian per se. I guess I don't try not to write religious-esque songs, and I think it does come out at times in my music, but it's not something that I've ever really wanted to pursue in that way. I really just want to make, whatever I feel like making that day, whatever that happens to be.
And it's interesting listening to your music, the different, do the different parts of you conflict, or do they all kind of work together? If you're, one day you're singing about something that you're praying about or thinking about deeply, and then another day you're singing about riding around in a Maserati and throwing money around, like, how do those things
I don't think they conflict. Sometimes they can feel that way or seem that way, but I just really I try not to how do I put this? Like I don't want to fake who I am, and I feel like a lot of worship leaders, I don't want to necessarily call them out, but I've never actually met a fellow worship leader, and never is a kind of a strong word there, so I'm using it loosely, but I've never really met a fellow worship leader that I've been like, wow, they were a really great person. Like, not that they're bad people, but I feel like a very fake sort of vibe, I guess, from a lot of them. And it's not specific to worship leaders, but actually a really well-known musician actually kind of voiced something similar when he got into doing worship music. Now he's the drummer of a super popular, I don't know if they're still a considered Christian band, but Under Oath was a huge Christian band in the 2000s, and their drummer he's had a couple of other side projects, but one of his name's Aaron Gillespie, and he has 2 or 3 worship albums, and he got a little kind of frustrated. I watched a podcast with him years ago. He had said, I just feel like everyone like wanted me to be fake and like wanted me to kind of be like this sort of like Jesus all the time type of person, and that's just not who I am. And he just wanted to make a few worship albums. But he like off the stage, he's very authentic. He's not really, I don't know. You just can't, be perfect all the time. And I feel like everybody who acts that way or wants to be perceived that way, just comes off kind of strange. And I think that's, sort of, it's kind of a negative aspect, and maybe it's not all bad, but certainly can be a negative aspect to kind of modern religion and how people really, one of the things people really get frustrated by with just religion in general is that sort of feeling that they get.
Yeah, totally. I know that coming from, I come originally from a family of preachers and preachers' kids, and people who were, been very involved with church, and in a lot of church settings, there is sort of a persona that you're supposed to maintain. And, particularly if you are somebody who's, part of the ministry or related to the part of the ministry, that you're supposed to exemplify this characteristic. And, to me, I always go back to like the Psalms, where like the psalmist is really saying like some really raw, visceral stuff. It's not all just like hallelujah, praise God all the time. It's like, God, why have you abandoned me? There's some really strong emotions in there. And I think that authenticity belongs in the church. And I don't know that we hear it enough.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I had a conversation years ago with my youth pastor at the time. I think I was like 17 or something like that. And I was going to sing something in church. I don't remember what it was, but it was some song that I had written. And I said, well, it's not really a Christian song. And then he was like, well, what does that even mean? Like, right? Like every song you write's a Christian song, really? Because now argue that point, I suppose. But like it's written, if not, not necessarily a praise song, but it's coming, from, where I was at that day or whatever the case may be. And I guess I kind of feel that way a lot of times. And I, I think of songs that I've written and I'm like, yeah, this is not really, I don't feel like it's a very, I'm trying to think of the word, like holy song. It's a word I'm trying to think of, but anyway, it's certainly
it's sacred.
Yeah. It doesn't like fit. And there are definitely songs that I will say this one probably makes sense. I've written that I'm like, I won't show people at church or like, oh, I hope they don't listen to that one.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I just sort of took that and decided, at some point, like, I just don't care. Like, it's just what I feel like writing that day. Does it send the right message? I really don't know. Maybe it doesn't, but I just don't want to worry myself with it too much. I know I'm not perfect. That's fine. I can only do so much. And I think, I tend to think that people resonate with that, at least on some level. And so, yeah, I guess as a secular artist, I don't really have a good sense of like, this is my purpose as a Christian in music, but I certainly think there is room there. I don't think there's a hard line that says you can't cross this line and then still be a Christian or whatever. And I stopped caring.
Yeah.
Talking to myself, I got the best ideas. They kinda freak me out though, but it's okay getting out of my own way. We'll be okay, 'cause everything always works out for me. Yeah. My thoughts scaring me, open up my eyes and see they ain't got a hold on me, right where we ought to be. My thoughts scaring me, open up my eyes and see they ain't got a hold on me, right where we ought to be.
Well, and that's, there's a long tradition of that. When I listen to, say, Christian radio, it often becomes the same thing over and over again. And I long for something like, like Johnny Cash, who could very easily go from like, I love Jesus to I love Jack Daniels to I'm in prison because I killed somebody or even, at another end of the spectrum, like U2 that sing very, they sing about God all the time, but in all these different contexts, and don't necessarily promote themselves as a Christian band, although at least some of the members of the band surely are.
Yeah.
And even like Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins talks about the influence of God in his music, even though it goes all over the place. That's one of the things that drew me to the song that I've been using as the theme song for the show, Purpose, because it's, the message of it is great, but it starts off just very raw, just like what the fuck am I doing here? And then gets to purpose. Is there a story behind that song?
Yeah. And I was actually shocked when you asked me, if you could use the song, because I didn't realize, like, I never expected somebody to actually like get the whole meaning of it. Because I mean, it kind of started out. It was actually right around the time I changed my name to Steev RX, and I was looking for a song. I still had my eclectic self at the time, and it started off as a side project, and then after a month, I was like, this really fits, and I just moved out all my music over to under the new name. But I was looking for like a good first song. And something that like sort of just I wrote the lyrics first, And so that was kind of in the back of my mind. And it was actually in church one day. I think the pastor was out, and instead it was like a youth led service. And so one of the kids in youth group actually like gave his testimony, but it was very, I would say, atypical to what you would normally think of as a testimony. It was like, I don't know, I just started coming here like a few months ago, and like, it was kind of cool. Like, I don't know. And then I went home, and then I came back. I was like, I don't know, should I go back again? And then it was very like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm here. And so in the song and kind of what I really tried to capture from that is like, okay, so if this was me and I was like 13 and I was like this kid, like what would I want to write? And so that's like why, that song has more expletives, and the meaning of it's actually hilarious, has more expletives than any song I've ever put out. and it's so like, it's that teenage angst though of like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing here, but like it's seems like the right thing to do or something, and like isn't really sure, but he's sort of found something he's not sure of yet. I have to say, easily one of my favorite, top 5 like lyrics that I've written. Just it was a cool story, and I think it really captured sort of that experience of like coming to church for the first time and being unsure. Maybe you don't want to be there, and all of that kind of being okay and just part of the process, I think.
Well, it really spoke to me when I heard it, and reminded me a lot of my journey has been a lot about that, about kind of like breaking out of the the persona that you're supposed to show up with, and trying to be authentic, and getting in trouble in youth group by asking questions that you weren't really supposed to ask. Like, no, we're all just supposed to pretend like we're angelic the whole time we're here. Like, no, I really want to know about, like, let's talk about sex and drugs and what our lives are like. Before we get sent downstairs to the regular service. But I think that's really the heart of Christianity. I think that whatever heaven is, I think there's going to be a lot of surprises there. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are like, oh, wow, you're here? Like, wow. Oh, wow. There's a lot of people. Wow. All these, very authentic souls who didn't play the part of good Christian, but will be received, I think. And a lot of this show is about struggling with stuff and being like, yeah, I'm here, and I keep coming back, and I don't always exactly know why, but there's something about this story and this religion and this culture that keeps drawing me back, and I keep just trying to find out more and more about it.
Yeah, I feel that a lot of times as a musician, like because that's sort of been my function for the vast majority of my church experience, if not all of it. I mean, I was like, 4 years old when I sang my first solo. So that's like, I've been doing it ever since. So that's pretty much the entirety of my church experience is just music. And so like, as an adult, I'm like, well, I don't really know if I would be here if I wasn't like leading worship, but like I look doing it. But then it was funny when I went to Europe actually in September. I spent an entire month in the Netherlands. So that was actually the first time I decided to go. I speak Dutch. And so I went to a Dutch speaking church. It was a great way to practice the language too. But that was actually the first time I just went because I didn't have to. Like I just went. And so yeah, a lot of my church experience has been that. It's been like, well, yeah, I have to go do here to lead music. And so it was just, it's hard to divorce myself from that.
I hear you. Yeah. I often find myself, in churches. I was a sound engineer at a church over in the city. I live not far from New York City. Okay. But when we were in the city, I was a sound engineer for like 20 years, like Sunday morning, go put mics on the priests in this big cathedral. Yeah. And now we're in a small town, and I walk, walked into this church and everybody was very welcoming, and I kind of let it slip, like, oh yeah, I've done sound engineering before, and the next thing you know, I'm back behind the mixing board, back in the back, and it really does. It kind of like gets me there on mornings that I wouldn't typically go to church, where I'm like, well, I kind of. I kind of gotta, so the people on Zoom can hear us and whatnot. So yeah, so taking a responsibility like that keeps me involved.
Yeah, I think my generation and younger really have a hard time kind of seeing the purpose, and I think I really identify with that, and really the meaning of what a church should be or what it is has definitely gotten lost in culture. And I remember a lot of people talking about, what why do we come to church? What, like, is it like, is it supposed to fulfill some kind of purpose for us, or is it the opposite? And I don't know. I remember those sort of conversations in youth group, but I never remembered anybody coming up with a good answer. and maybe that's the point. I don't know, but it's certainly, I feel like it's been a challenge with culture and specifically with my generation, just kind of wrapping our head around, like, what is it?
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of like surveys and polls, and a lot of people kind of pulling their hair out to try to get younger people into churches. So there's a lot of religious organizations going on, like, what are we doing wrong? And it's interesting to see the answers, because some of the answers are around like moral stances on certain things, like I can't go to church if I'm not going to be able to bring my gay friends with me, because you're going to tell me that they're all going to hell. Or, I find that it's hypocritical that, I bring my money to church, but I don't like how you're spending it, and we're not helping the poor, issues like that. But then there are also these issues of just like, what is it for? Is it a self-serving, is it to make people in the church feel better, or is it to help the community? And there are several books by people who have kind of, I guess, deconstructed is the word of the day, that talk about the things that they miss. My generation and older going to churches, and there were the people who brought casseroles over when you were sick or somebody died, and there was community, and even people who didn't necessarily believe in God would send their kids to church because they wanted to give them some kind of moral foundation, or at least get them thinking about existential things. And maybe this would be the launching pad for what they do next. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. The church and people who could potentially go to church, I think, are all struggling a little bit right now with their purpose.
Yeah, it was really interesting, actually. I mentioned going to the Netherlands, and I really I've always wanted to go live in a foreign country for a certain period of time, and so I've did that. I'm probably going to go back again next time for longer. But the family community really strikes you, and in the Netherlands specifically, and I think it's definitely there in other countries as well in Europe, but the Netherlands in particular is a very great place to raise children. And it was interesting, the church really had that community. And so for me, like that, I saw that and I was like, oh, I get it now. Because it's not something I ever really connected with, I guess, until I went over there and realized, like, this is what America kind of lost. In the sense that we have so many different cultures, and we don't really, I'll just put it this way. It's very easy for us to kind of lose our identity, in all of that. And so to go and kind of see that community somewhere else was very interesting. And the fascinating thing, at least for the first church I went to there, it wasn't a contemporary service, and they were doing absolutely nothing that if you go to any church in America that wants to get young people, there was none of that. It was like all hymns, like the most boring thing you could possibly think of. It was in this beautiful Catholic cathedral. It was a Protestant church, but it was in this cathedral that the church owned. And, it was nothing modern about it. And I've been to, the church that I went to when I lived there was very much a modern, theater, with a band and all that. But even there, you still get the sense like, okay, we don't need this though. Like it could be different and all these people would still probably come. So it's just a very strong, like, community that you feel that is often lacking here.
Yeah. That you can have it all, that I'ma go and lose it all, but they don't know what's right for me. They've already made the calls, waiting for me to fall, but giving up ain't right for me. I guess I'm flying alone, can nobody keep me down, I'm going for another round. I don't need the tone, I'm gonna make this work for me. I won't leave myself out in the crowd, I'll make it just fine on my own. I've never been one to fit in the mold, I won't give it unfold.
What do you think is driving that? Is it something about like American individualism, or is there like a certain theology that's missing?
I don't know. It's hard to say, and I definitely, it's probably a combination of things. For one, we do, like, I didn't notice this until I started learning languages. It's a hobby of mine, but like a lot of Europeans won't understand when, say, like an American says, "Oh, I'm Irish," whereas Americans, we just like, "Oh yeah, his parents were Irish and they came over, whenever." And a lot of Europeans just don't get it, and it's just like us trying to find our identity somewhere. And so I think that's a part of it where we just don't often feel that community. And I think it's also just modern, life in general, being able to get on, Zoom or get on a computer and not talk to anybody definitely lends itself to just being a little more antisocial, a little more individualistic. So yeah, no, it's probably a combination of quite a few different things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can sit in the living room with my wife and my daughter, and all of us will be on a different computer, talking to somebody else or reading somebody else, but not always talking to each other. It's really easy to do that. Like, we have to intentionally make time to be our own community of family. So yeah, the technology has definitely kind of helped isolate us as well. So the music that you do in church, is it different than the music that you make and perform on your own? Like, is it more like popular Christian tunes? Or
yeah, definitely. I certainly, if you pick, a random 50 praise songs, like I probably sang them all. So yeah, it's definitely
it's like 10,000 Reasons.
Oh yeah, all those.
You know all the reasons.
Yeah. So no, but I've actually, I do have songs that I've written that I do perform in church. And sometimes I'll even bring something, maybe I wrote it, maybe I didn't, that's secular, that just seems to fit. Or, I definitely don't like to say, oh, this isn't, doesn't belong in church because of XYZ. There's plenty of, there's plenty of applications or opportunities to bring a new perspective. Who knows? Yeah. There's definitely a big difference, but I guess I try to no matter what I'm doing, I kind of try to just bring my personality into it, even if maybe in church I'm maybe a little more reserved, but I really think that's important, and that's something that as a worship leader I try not to just be a different person on Sunday. That really bugs me.
That's really cool to bring your whole self to the service. One of my, I don't know that it's exactly worship song, but I'm sure the band Casting Crowns.
Yeah.
The song Stained Glass Masquerade, which it's a song about people coming to church and kind of pretending to play a certain role and wanting to kind of like break through that and bring the real self. It's sort of harkens all the way back to St. Augustine talking about how churches are more like hospitals than they are like museums or theaters. It's a place for people to bring their whole self and their wounds and their injuries and their realness.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're trying to do that.
Yeah, it's funny. You just reminded me of something you often hear a lot is like it's sort of like a cliche mantra almost, like you don't just be a Christian on Sunday kind of thing, but almost flipping that in the reverse and saying, well, why can't I just still be a Christian but not have all the answers? It's almost
right,
yeah.
Right.
So I guess that's certainly inadvertently I guess become my sort of mantra. Is just like I don't really want to pretend I have the answers. Like I don't care. Like if you don't like it, that's cool. Like whatever. And I could definitely say churches probably need more of that. I just feel like the idea that like I just don't want to overthink it, I guess is probably a better way to say it. Like I don't want to. I just want to show up and just be who I am. And I as a worship leader, I will say there are things that I probably like. I'm aware that I'm in a position of somewhat influence and people maybe expect a certain thing, but I think in that same token, like I don't just want to fake it and like I can still not say everything perfect or make mistakes, and I think that needs to be okay. Even if like somebody's expectation of what I should be isn't what it actually is. I think those sort of things need to be okay, and that's kind of real acceptance, at least what the church should be, in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should kind of take all comers and be able to be our real, authentic selves, like bring our whole self to church.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. My now I didn't grow up as like a preacher's kid, but my mother actually has been going to seminary, and she just I don't know where she is in the process, but she's actually leading a church now, and so that's been a whole like new kind of thing. And so,
oh wow,
it's a small church. It's a lot of retired. They're trying to revitalize the church, and so that's what she's working on. And I've sort of it's been kind of good that I ended up not having a study every morning, every Sunday morning, place to go to lead worship, because I'm able to kind of go and sort of do some songs at her church and whatnot. But yeah, that's been kind of a new experience where I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I like it, but
oh, that's cool that you're able to support her in that, though.
Yeah, no, it's been fun so far. We'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm talking to another church, and I might end up going there, but yeah, we'll see.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you have any new music that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm really excited, for this next year I tried to do it this year, and I sort of fell off. You know, I had some big plans going to Europe, which put a wrench in pretty much everything. But I'm going to try again to release a song every month.
Oh wow, that's ambitious.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing, and yeah, I'm busy right now, and because every month except December, I should say, because December is Christmas. So like music, like it just doesn't. There's no point in releasing music in December. It just kind of tanks. So
you're not going to do a new Christmas song?
I could, like if I really wanted to, but I really don't. I really don't want to. But yeah, so I'm writing some stuff right now, and that's my goal for 2025.
Well, cool. Well, I look forward to hearing new stuff. I don't want to keep you on all night, so I'll probably wrap up here pretty soon. But are there any other words of wisdom that you would have for people listening to a podcast like mine?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of the mantra of the night is sort of just don't overthink it. You know, like I think a lot of churches, a lot of I think a lot of church leaders just feel like they have to have all the answers. But to me, really, as somebody who grew up, you know, in church, and you know, that's just the strangest thing to me. It's because it just feels like the antithesis of what it's really all about. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of the one big thing is just be yourself and do your best, or you know, whatever that looks like.
Right. Well, that is awesome. And I'm really glad that I, through whatever providence, stumbled upon your music and got to meet you and talk with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to share some more with our listeners. Where's the best place for people to find your music, find out more about you?
So my website is steevrx.com, steevrx.com. And that's also my handle on Instagram. And of course, I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, all of the streaming platforms, so you can check out my music there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Steev, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
And and blessings to you and your work.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Faith Still Seeking. To find out more about this program, go to faithstillseeking.com. To find out more about my work, you can find me at kellywilson.com. Our theme song, Purpose, is written and performed by musician Steev RX. You can find more of his music on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
I guess I found some kind of purpose.